He knew he was going to die. Have you ever heard the sound of silence? Not that common silence, but the one that carries pain, loneliness, and abandonment. The kind of silence that doesn't need words because it screams inside the soul. This is the story of an ox, but not just any ox. It's the story of an animal that was more faithful than many people, who carried weight, who fed an entire family, who bled at the hands of those who claimed to care for him. And in the end, it was left, forgotten, betrayed. In a world where pain seems to have become routine, some stories still manage to bring tears to even the toughest hearts. This is one of them, a true, brutal and sad story, but necessary, because sometimes it is in the suffering of the innocent that we see the cruelest reflection of humanity. This ox had no name, at least not one that the boss remembered. He was called the Old Man, or the Lock. A cold nickname for someone who, for years, was the silent basis of sustenance in that land. Under the scorching sun, under rain and mud, he carried, always carried it. He was the first to wake up and the last to stop, never complained, never hesitated. It was brute strength with gentle eyes. I ate little, slept on the hard floor, and carried on, always followed. But time does not forgive even the most loyal. And when his legs began to fail, when his eyes began to lose their shine, and his breathing became heavy, the boss saw no more use for him. Without a word, without a goodbye, he was thrown into the back of a rusty truck, as if it were an old piece of furniture, a nuisance. What goes through the head of an animal like this when it realizes it is being discarded? When you smell fear, the smell of blood in the air, and the footsteps of others who went and didn't return. He looked back. He looked for something, maybe by a familiar face. Maybe it was a sign that this was just another trip. But all he received was silence. The same silence that accompanied his entire life. That ox, which carried years of work on its back, was abandoned without any gratitude. And the saddest thing is that he knew. Yes, he knew. In the look, there was understanding. There was sadness. A sadness that many humans will never understand, because they never loved without expecting anything in return, because they never gave their all, only to be discarded in the end. This story is not just about an animal. It's about all those who give themselves completely and still end up forgotten. It's about invisible sacrifice, about ignored loyalty, about a pain that makes no noise but that burns inside. And it is also about the reflection of a society that has lost sensitivity, that normalized abandonment, who thinks everything and everyone is replaceable. But before we continue this story, stop for a second and think, how many oxen like this are there out there? How many are being discarded right now after a lifetime of delivery? Because what comes next isn't just a tragic ending, it's a muffled scream you need to hear. He was born under the golden sunrise on a random farm, like so many others. A calf with curious eyes, still defenseless, whose trembling legs barely supported its weight. He knew nothing about pain, abandonment, or ingratitude. Little did he imagine what fate had in store for him. All he knew was the damp heat of the earth, the smell of fresh grass, the light wind rustling the leaves around him. He was born in silence, but from the first moment he carried an internal scream, the impulse to live, to exist, to be seen. When his mother licked him for the first time, he felt something like comfort. The wet tongue on the fur, the heat of the body, the faint sound of the other's lungs. He suckled, got closer, took shelter under its shadow. After all, he was her son, dependent, protected. In the beginning, the world was simple, eating, sleeping, looking for food, exploring the enclosure, listening to the sounds of the wind and dew falling on the leaves at dawn. Back then, it was just life, no questions asked, no judgment, but there were eyes lurking, human eyes that were already calculating, measuring, projecting returns. From an early age, his boss looked at him and saw potential, not friendship. The day came when the calf was weighed, written down on paper, catalogued as another form of future profit. He barely understood. How could something so pure have a price? Grew up, slowly, steadily. His muscles began to emerge under his skin. His body lengthened. His legs gained strength. He trotted with more confidence, looked steadily at the horizon. He observed broken branches, old trunks, shadows projected on the pasture. I saw the sky color at dawn and fade away at dusk. And in the midst of this, I thought, albeit in a simple way, that perhaps I had a purpose beyond existing and obeying. Something like being recognized, being loved, being something that was worth more than being disposable. Over time, the relationship between him and humans became closer. Or do it in a utilitarian way. He was fed, walked, taken to pastures, to the corral, to the shade. Many times the man approached with a whip, with a rope. He didn't understand the harsh gestures. I reacted with fear, out of instinct. There was fear in his eyes. There was a desire to run away, but he knew no other life. I didn't know the human voice that welcomes. I didn't know touch that comforts. I only knew routine and waiting. The day came when he was separated from his brothers, from his fellow cubs, those same ones who had run beside him in the still, soft pasture, who had shared the shadow under the same sky. They were taken, sold, killed, or transported. He stayed, and he was alone. The pasture seemed too big. The silence seemed to grow. He tried to roar, but only a dull, muffled sound came out, not even a loud moo. He wanted to attract attention. He wanted to be heard, but no one listened. Only the wind responded. In solitude, he began to realize something terrible. His world was not facing him, was focused on interest, for profit, for use. He saw other animals arrive, be sold, taken away, while he remained. Why? Maybe because it was still good. Maybe because it still had value until the end. Maybe because it was still strong enough. But the moment it became less useful, doubt would become certainty. The boss rarely showed up to talk. When he came, he appeared with a cold expression, pasty, calculating. He talked about quantities, weight, cost. "These cattle are doing well," he said. "You need to put on more weight." The ox watched him from afar, feeling his presence like a weight on his chest, and he was waiting for something, some gesture, one touch, a whisper, a word that says, "You matter." But it never came. The years passed. The ox grew old. The skin began to sag a little. The joints became stiffer. The step became a little slower. He felt pain that he couldn't name, cramps that came on suddenly, the weight of every part of his body. Still, he insisted on following. He still breathed deeply in the morning sun, looked for pasture, headed along the trail that he himself knew in clear moments. I still looked at the horizon with hope, or what was left of it. When the abandonment began, he hardly expected it. One day, he was pushed into a part of the corral that he didn't know well. Gates were closed. He found himself isolated. It stayed there, alone. No company, no decent food. The grass was thin, the water was far away, the space was narrow. He tried to leave, but the gates wouldn't budge. He tried to call, moo, snort, but his sound didn't seem to penetrate the air. Nobody responded. Nobody came. He was trapped, not by strong bonds, but by indifference. He suffered from thirst, from hunger, from the thirst for affection. His stomach felt empty like a wound. He felt the pain in his body like a warning of betrayal. And once again, he looked back. He searched for the face of the person he had cared for, but he saw only shadow, just the trail of footprints that disappeared. He could see figures in the distance, perhaps workers, but none turned toward him. None stopped. He was invisible. And then he was taken. Where to? He didn't know. I just knew I was walking. The bodywork creaked, the body swayed, his head swam. He tried to stand, but his steps became painful. The ground seemed harder, colder. He could smell rust, the strange odor of metal and dust, the faint scent of blood in the air. He was confused. I tried to understand. I tried to remember what was there before. The green pasture, the gentle rain, the morning heat. but that seemed distant, like a dead dream. Inside the truck, he must have thought, am I being taken to finish it? Have I been replaced by something newer, more useful? Did I deserve this after everything I did? He could feel the anguish rising within him. Every swing was a warning, every bump was a pain, and every whisper of the wind reminded him of the world he had lost. Meanwhile, those watching from the outside, you who are watching this video, feel something tiny squeezing in their chest, an invisible knot. You feel the heat of injustice. You realize this story is more than hers. It's about all of us, about the ingratitude we make, the sacrifices we ignore, the abandonment we allow. It's about the silent voices that suffer without us seeing. And the ox, now, already tired, already scarred, already injured, looks ahead, still waiting, though your hope is fading like a sail in the wind. He wants answers, he wants dignity, he wants to be heard, even if he doesn't have a voice. If you are still here, feeling the tightness in your chest, understand, this story is not over yet. The cruelest part is yet to come. And maybe, after you hear everything he felt, nothing will seem ordinary anymore. If you want, comment, I listen, if you are willing to listen to this silent voice until the end. He was no longer the curious calf that looked at the horizon with gestures of innocence. He became a robust ox with a muscular body, mounted, well-defined muscles, eyes that have lost the shine of naivety and carry the weight of resignation. That life that had begun with soft promises turned into a heavy, mechanical, dull routine. The routine set in like a prison without visible bars. Every day he followed the same path, faced the same tracks, smelled the same smells, repeated the same movements until each gesture seemed made of iron and a tired soul. He grew up without affection. The gentle touch has been forgotten in books that talk about natural kindness. In what many call dealing with cattle, there's no room for emotion, just efficiency, just productivity. He was fed to make him fat, treated as living raw material, each meal calculated to maximize gain, each ration measured to accelerate weight, each pasture chosen according to logistics. He ate like someone who eats to survive, not like someone who receives presence, care, or affection. The water came at the exact times, not too early, not too late, like a factory schedule. Meanwhile, he looked around and saw others disappear. I would go to the corral yard and find the space empty, the gate wide open in the distance, the echo of retreating hooves. Other oxen, pasture companions, siblings disappeared without warning. They never came back. He missed her, but didn't know who to ask. There was no one to give him an explanation. When the boss ordered to take ex-oxen to the trailer, he saw figures leaving, walking, being summarily swallowed by the road or by death, and that entered his heart like a harrowing silence. Every dawn, he awaited the lock of the corral door, the sound of the iron lock opening, the call of the pedestrians, and he obeyed. He walked with a rhythm that no longer belonged only to his body, but to the destiny traced by other people's hands. Each step was like a rehearsal of resignation. He learned little by little to lower expectations, accepting that there would be no caresses, no names spoken tenderly, no warmth of care. He knew there was a value in every pound of meat that thickened, a book value that outweighed his existence. His life began to be marked by predetermined paths, from there to the pasture, from there to the corral, from there back to the trough, from there to the shallow shade, from there to the shallow rest. When the sun was shining, he would look for the only tree that offered shade and remain motionless, eyes half closed, head hanging, neck bent with exhaustion. It was a living illustration of abandonment, because everything around it was still alive, wind, leaves, birds. But inside it there was only waiting, wait for something that wouldn't come. Even surrounded by iron bars, gates that closed with a bang, and solid ground rails, he continued to look at the horizon, no longer with childish hope, but with contained pain, a silent appeal. He knew every inch of that space, every strip of land, every puddle of mud, every metallic antenna that cut across the sky. He knew the sound of tractors in the distance, the noise of trucks carrying other oxen, the clinking of metal at the gates. He felt it all like a song of destiny, a sad melody that accompanied him day after day. Sometimes he crossed paths with the boss, who came to plan a strategy. The man talked about batch turnover, conversion rate, ideal weight. He talked about cold numbers, statistics, goals. He never talked about the soul. He never talked about pain. He never talked about looking, except to see how much he already weighed. But that human look he had seen when he was young seemed to have been lost forever. And the ox knew it. He knew that, for that man, he was not life. He was a walking dollar sign. Each movement of the ox had been done so many times before that it had become an automaton. He got up with restrained effort, stretched his creaky legs, walked to the trough, chewed slowly, walked with a tired step, slept at the permitted hours when he wasn't taken to walk from gate to gate for inspection, weighing in the sun, in the aridity, at the moral sacrifice of being observed as an object. There was no warm routine, there was no graphism in the marks of time, just repetition, calculations, indifference. In silence, he endured the heat, the cold, the rain, the dryness. In the intense heat, I felt the sweat running down my ribs, the weight of the sun piercing my skin, my body groaning for shade. In the cold night he shivered and quickly lost heat, but he had nowhere to huddle but the hard floor. The rain ran over him like liquid lament. The drops hit him. On freezing mornings, I felt the emptiness in my joints, the sharp creak when I got up. Still, he lifted his body. It still moved. He still lived, or tried. He looked back frequently, the moment he could lift his head, as if searching for something that was gone. A few moments of memory, the smell of the mother, the warmth of the calf, the gurgle of fresh water, the soft grass beneath her belly. All of this became a distant memory, almost a dream. All of this became an absence. He ran his fingers, I looked, if I had fingers, over the pit of memory, but I saw only faint silhouettes. He continued even so, carrying within himself this longing that he didn't cherish. During days of heavier rain, the corral trapped mud and accumulated water became filth. He saw the mud collecting on the hull, the murky water, the heavy smell of manure. On those days, it was more difficult to walk. Every step was effort. Every breath came heavier. He felt the weight of the mud stuck to his hooves. His body was heavy with dirt and accumulated waste. And still he walked. He continued to be crossed by the routine that slowly crushed him. He observed the others when they appeared. Some new oxen came, full of vigor, a sparkle in their eyes, and he saw them pass by, being approved for fattening, for travel, for a hidden destination. Some didn't pass. They were removed, separated, taken away. He saw them disappear at the gate, in the truck, on the road. He knew that the same fate could be in store for him too. But he dared not think about it. I just thought about following. I just thought about enduring it. I thought about existing as long as possible. And there were days when he stopped walking, remained motionless, head down, eyes half closed. He seemed to contemplate the void. Perhaps he internally calculated how many steps he had already taken, how many kilometers he had carried on his hooves, how many days he had been thirsty without anyone noticing, how many moments he had lived without seeing any benefit beyond the sacrifice. Each day that passed seemed to corrode something inside, as if his life was being wasted, compressed, reduced to a shell. The soul remained, but it was bruised, wound caused by abandonment, by indifference. He was an ox, but also a symbol. Symbol of all those who work, who sacrifice, who give without receiving. He was an ox, but someone who suffers. He was an ox without a voice, but his silence was a monument of pain. And everyone who looks at this story feels the discomfort of knowing that things like this happen, that silenced voices are discarded, that sacrificed lives are ignored, that customary abandonment disguises itself as normality. Even on the most beautiful mornings, when the sun rose harmoniously and promisingly, he would wake up with his body frozen, his breathing heavy, his eyes dull. He considered continuing. He passed through the shadow, walked slowly, reached the trough, chewed, headed. Wrinkles began to appear around his eyes, if that makes sense for an ox. But there were marks. Marks of suffering, marks of years of imposed routine, marks of slow and insidious abandonment. And then, my friends, in this silent routine, he became a spectre, not in the literal sense, but figuratively, someone present but erased, a living but invisible body, a being that exists in flesh and blood but is being undone inside. He often looked at the gate and felt like running, not away, but toward himself. I wanted to break something. I wanted a word to stop time. I wanted a human to say, "You matter." But the world imposed silence on him. Imposed silence. Cruel silence. If you are following along, holding this discomfort close to your chest, imagine what happens at these times. A thirst for meaning, a thirst for presence. Imagine how many times he wished for a human gesture, a voice that said he was more than body, more than flesh, more than weight, and how many times he remained invisible. He stood there, walking, enduring, breathing, waiting for something to change, hoping someone would look into his eyes and see what few dare to see, that his life had value beyond its usefulness. And in this cold, mechanical routine, the ox matured. Maturing in pain, in silent resignation, in inner abandonment. And now we are about to see how far this delivery will take. Are you ready to hear what he felt? To see what no one wants to see? To confront the injustice that many pretend doesn't exist? If you made it this far, leave "I feel" in the comments. I want to know who is willing to feel this pain with me, he knew. Ever since he was forced to leave the corral, ever since he felt the weight of the trailer on his tired paws, ever since the cold smell of metal surrounded him, he knew that this would be his last day. There was no doubt. His look carried desperation. It wasn't anger, it wasn't escape, it was conscious resignation, it was deep fear that ran through my veins like a silent poison. And yet he had no voice to tell. The floor was cold metal, nervous plates laid to support nervous hooves. Each step felt like a shock to the soul, as if his flesh recognized that it was about to be consumed by destiny itself. He hesitated. It stopped. He felt the echo of space, an echo of fear, of abandonment, of injustice. All around, bars and corridors, iron chains, automatic doors, the dry sound of creaking hinges. He was in a trance, alive, but already left waiting. The smell of blood hung in the air. Thin, insistent, horrible. He felt it in the holes in his nose, slowly penetrating his lungs. It was the smell of anticipated death, of lives that were once alive, of voices that had fallen silent. Even if he didn't know how to pronounce the names, he recognized the smell of pain, the smell of pessimism, the smell of goodbye. And in her stomach, there was a knot, a bitter anticipation, an invitation to terror. The doors closed behind him. Thick steel doors, dampening the world outside. Electric clicks, automatic locks, bright cold lights. He tried to look back, but the hallway stopped him. There was no turning back. The path forward was inevitable. And in that silence of the metallic corridor, each slow beat of the ox's heart seemed to echo like a warning. You are coming to the end. He didn't scream. He didn't have time. He had no voice, just world, doors, smell, waiting. He felt the sharp touch of the sloping floor, the force pushing him into the gate, firm footsteps pushing him back. He was reluctant. The muscles protested, the heavy body swayed, the hull was slipping, the bright light was blinding. He closed his eyes for a moment, and within them he saw flashes, green pasture, his mother, shadows of disappeared friends, the golden sun, the light breeze on his face, the wind that used to blow freedom. And those flashes were painful to him, vivid memories he wanted to forget but couldn't. A few men passed him, figures in light lab coats, faces covered. They had mechanical voices. They said technical phrases. Drive to the stunning room, control range, slaughter line. To them, he was just a unit. For him, they were ghosts who came to deliver the final blow. And in these words, he recognized no mercy, recognized programming, recognized rigor, recognized destiny. As he was guided, the cold light cut through the planes of the body, revealing its fat, its bones, and its trembling muscles. He felt firm hands gripping his sides, pushing him, pushing him. He tried to dodge. Primal instinct. But there was no space. There was no escape. The corridor narrowed. The air became heavy. The smell of blood was more intense, and before he knew it, he was in the illuminated chamber, under rams of white light, under gazes that measured him as a product, not as life. Inside the chamber, he stopped, immobilized, silent, staring. Time dragged on. Every second was an eternity, an electric hum, surprisingly cold. He could hear her breathing, short, heavy. I felt my body vibrating inside. He was a prisoner of fear and pain even before he was injured. And the insistence of silence crushed him more than the cut. He was there, present but invisible, a convict who could still feel. In his eyes was pleading, not for mercy, but for recognition, for someone to see him, to understand his pain. But there was no one to listen, just metal gears, impassive protocols, lethal machines. He instinctively lowered his head. The heat throbbed. The muffled sound of the mechanism resounded like a door slamming. The final moment was approaching. He could feel the air vibrate with tension, stomach tight, throat dry, muscles tense. He regretted being a being who couldn't scream, who couldn't say, "He doesn't deserve this." And in the final moment, when the cold blade approached, when the cut was completed, he thought, if such a thought could still exist, why? Why was the service worth more than me? Why did usefulness speak louder than life? He looked up one last time, stared at the invisible blade, took a deep breath, and in the bloody silence that was to come, his last breath would be his silent scream, his silent voice, his testimony of pain. Are you there, following this sad narrative, feeling this weight in your chest? Do you feel that such a dedicated life could be coldly discarded? If so, leave "I feel this pain" in the comments. I want to see how many people recognize that silent voices deserve to be heard. How many like him go through this every day, invisible, discarded, left to silence while the world runs its course without noticing? How many lives waste away in pain, overshadowed by routine and the human ego, without anyone even noticing? The silence of those eyes says more than 1,000 words could ever whisper. And maybe it's time to listen. When you hear this story, when you feel this anguish in your chest, something moves inside. This is not just a sad story. It's a mirror. It's an invitation to empathy, a silent call for you to recognize that the pain we ignore may be closer than we imagine. If we, humans, have a voice, choice, rights, we at least owe a listening ear to those who don't have them. It existed, he lived, he suffered, and its value transcends weight, flesh, utility. Your life, the one that no one wanted to see, is worthy of being recognized. How many symbolic oxen, Kami, there are among us, sacrificed, abandoned, invisible people, and how many of their silent eyes cry out for a gesture of recognition. If you are there, breathing, having the choice to give your opinion, to speak, to act, take advantage of this gift, because he at the last moment couldn't ask. The value of a life that no one saw goes beyond flesh and blood. It goes to the core of the essence. It goes to feelings, to the right to exist with dignity. When we are created to serve, to produce, to please, and then discarded, we are not just hurting bodies, we are hurting souls. Each silent surrender, each abandonment disguised as normality, feeds the collective emptiness that many carry without knowing it. Have you ever stopped to think about everything this ox has experienced? The constant fear, the loneliness, the camouflaged abandonment, the cold calculation that dictated his destiny, the indifference of those who could see and turn away. Imagine if he had a voice, but he couldn't. Imagine if it had a human face, but it was seen as an object. This hurts because in every cold act, there is a choice. And when we choose to close our eyes, we are accomplices. So it's not just about watching, it's about feeling, to recognize, to protest in silence, even if the world doesn't listen right away. Because this ox, without a name, without a voice, without a recognized face, represents so many silenced lives. Sad stories, human injustices, abandonment and ingratitude that are repeated out of sight, out of the camera, out of our reach, but that continue to exist. When you see an animal, a being given over to pain or fear, and you move on, what are you ignoring? When you go through a life marked by suffering and do not extend an inner hand, even a symbolic one, what do you become? The injustice committed against this ox echoes in so many other places. In abandoned hearts, in sacrificed existences, in silenced dreams. Remember, this story forces reflection because it bothers comfort. Silence hurts because it reminds us of the abandonment we allow in ourselves and others. His look, empty and agonizing, demands compassion from us, demands regret from us, demands action from us. Even if minimal, even if interior recognition is already rescue. Imagine if, instead of ignoring, every person watching this narrative pauses and thinks, who else lives in silence? Who else have I silenced? Imagine if this impulse generated empathy, not just for the voiceless creatures, but for the people around us who feel invisible. This reflection can produce change. This weight on your chest can turn into responsibility, because it is not an exaggeration to say that a life that no one has seen can be more present than many lives seen. It can echo more, hurt more, seal more, and that's precisely why we need to listen. Listen to the silent scream, listen to abandonment, listen to the hidden sacrifice, listen to ingratitude, and by listening, we become less indifferent. You who are watching, don't let that weight die here in this video. Use it, let it echo. Allow this pain to generate the question, what can I do so that other voices are not silenced, that other lives are not thrown into the dark corner of indifference? When we accept listening to the silent, we begin to heal the invisible. Sometimes, all the world needs is someone who listens. Listen without judging. Listen without looking away. Listen with an open heart. If you've come this far, if you feel the knot in your chest, leave in the comments, I listen, or I commit to seeing. I want to see how many people are willing to listen to this pain that many pretend not to hear.